Welcome to the Reason Roundtable, your weekly libertarian podcast from the magazine of free minds and free markets. I am Matt Welch, subbing in for the absent Peter Suderman, and joined by Nick Gillespie, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, Katherine Mangu-Ward, and special guest star, podcaster extraordinaire from The Gist, Mike Pesca. Hello, everybody, and welcome, Pesca.
Hello, thanks.
Howdy.
Hey.
Mike, for those of the listeners and viewers keeping score at home, do you want to describe your politics in 10 words or less? Go.
Dang.
I believe we should do the most good for the most people while taking special attention to give a little something extra for the people who need it the most.
Wow.
23 words.
So you're
fired.
a communist. You're
Is
like to the left of Stalin.
You don't think we should do the most good for the most people? Who do you think we should do the most good for?
I don't know.
We're not.
Don't give him
This is not your.
Don't give him this ground, guys. Our thing does the most good for the most people. That's our argument.
Okay. So
I will
look how
point out that
defensive you are. If the answer is libertarian, that's fine.
He's got
it's
got a
Jeremy
bunch
Bentham.
of Howard the Duck comics on
true.
his wall. So
that's
that's
true.
good. Although
We're
you'll
gonna-
agree that the movie really was the best part of that whole franchise.
It was, in a way, in keeping with the weirdness of the franchise, the sexualization of said duck. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
already want to die. We're going to get into the great Ivy Wars of 2025 here in a moment. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Hey, Reason Roundtable listeners, Peter Suderman here. Do you know a student looking for a transformative opportunity that supports the foundations of a free society? Reliance College invites students aged 16 to 24 to the 2025 Great Connection Seminar in Chicago from July 26th to August 2nd. This year's theme, Reason and Free Will, dives into timeless ideas from writers such as Thomas Jefferson, Ayn Rand, and Aristotle. Students can sharpen critical thinking skills in small dynamic groups, developing the intellectual tools needed to thrive in a free society. Outside the classroom, they will explore Chicago's vibrant culture, touring museums, trying improv, comedy, and building lifelong personal connections. Parents, this program equips students to think, reason, and act independently. Go to reliancetocollege.org/reason to learn more and apply. Registration is just $800, including room and board for the full week with scholarships available. Don't miss out. Visit reliancecollege.org/reason to learn more and apply. That's reliancecollege.org/reason to learn more and apply.
Okay, President Donald Trump's forever wars on Harvard continued this fine Tuesday morning with a letter sent by the General Services Administration to all federal agencies instructing them to cancel any and all remaining contracts with the prestigious university, which would total up to around $100 million. Apparently, the move comes after the federal government froze $3.2 billion worth of grants to the Cambridge-based finishing school and also attempted to ban all the foreigners, which is about 25% of their customers, from attending the school. That was late last week, put off by a judge until a further hearing scheduled for this week. The administration contends that Harvard is unlawfully evading a 2023 Supreme Court ruling banning racial considerations in college admissions, says that it lacks faculty viewpoint diversity, which it does, that it shows, quote, a lack of commitment to our national values and priorities, end quote, and that it fosters anti-Semitism. Many free speech advocates who had previously been really hard on Harvard's lousy First Amendment record, people like the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education and hair model Steven Pinker of Harvard, are now sounding the alarm against the Trump administration's activities against Harvard in the name of free speech. Katherine, let's imagine for a second that you're talking to someone who would rather pound his anatomy with a ball-peen hammer than hear another word about the Ivy League for the rest of his life. Why should we care about what's going on in this conflict?
Because this is a classic example of what happens when you use every single weapon available at your disposal to go after a sort of unfairly chosen villain. And anyone could become the unfairly chosen villain at any time. I guess in Australia and New Zealand, they call it tall poppy syndrome.
Whoa.
So somebody's, head pokes up and they sort of are a little better than everyone else by some measure, and whack, it gets cut off. Fun facts for you guys today. Lots of other cultures have different words for this thing, and they're all very revealing. So Japan calls it the nail that sticks up. And in the Netherlands, they say, don't put your head above ground. So just a little bit of multicultural learning for you today.
And
that's what we should
above
care,
the
though.
Parapet. What about parapets?
That's true. That's another one.
I want to point out the Rush song, "The Trees," which is about how the maples can kind of create a union to keep down the mighty oak from growing too fast.
Yes.
Widely interpreted as a Randian parable from the Great Canadian Band, which now, if they wanted to go to Harvard, wouldn't be allowed to.
For some reason in Chile, they call it pulling the jacket. I don't know what that's about. Anyway, this is why people should care. Even if you think Harvard is a nightmare place populated with monsters about whom we should not care, this will eventually matter for other people and entities.
Why, though? Like, what is the aspect of this that is bad and care-worthy?
Right. So Trump decided that Harvard is bad. And then he looked around and he saw the entire palette of options available to him as the head of the executive branch and the bully pulpit wielder to punish an institution that has interactions with the U.S. government. And they are so many. I think we'll probably talk about them. But we have federal grants. We have the loans that go to students who attend. We have permissions to do business with foreign customers that you mentioned. We have tax status, which is being meddled with in a variety of ways. We have federal government as a customer. And that's just like the specific list of things that he has messed with this week. That doesn't include stuff like, letters from the Department of Education, accreditation for which there is some federal component, et cetera, et cetera. So this is just an example of why it is bad to have the federal government touch everything, to have its grubby little paws on every institution in so many different ways, because it gives them so many angles of attack.
I will add to that, Matt, that one of the reasons, and obviously I think I'm on the record a million times, I don't give a shit about Harvard, but I do care about the way that the Trump administration is. This is part of a full court press on all sorts of parts of civil society or of just the economy that Trump is trying to control. We're looking at a guy who's pushing his FCC to go after various kinds of content creators and networks and things like that. The FTC is getting into the mix and trying to strangle the ability of social media platforms to do what they want, which is part of free speech. He's gone after law firms. In almost every instance, Trump is now openly trying to push the world into his image. And I think that should be concerning to people, even as we can say, you know what, Harvard is a terrible institution in many respects, that Harvard maybe should not have a tax-exempt status, because nobody should have tax-exempt status, including Reason Foundation and things like that. But it's a problem. Trump is working every angle, working every ref to try to shut down anybody who disagrees with him about anything. That's not good.
Nick, very quickly, if you can, what do you say to the response that, okay, you just said right there, Nick Gillespie, that Harvard is really lousy and all these things, that Harvard wouldn't fix itself in the absence of this kind of heavy-handed activity by the Trump administration?
There's some truth to that, and I would actually point to the lawsuit that was brought by, people on behalf of students and groups that were being kicked out or not admitted to Harvard. That was settled a couple of years ago as preferable action than going through the federal government or using the government. The fact is that, Harvard did adopt institutional neutrality. They supposedly stopped forcing people applying for jobs there to do DEI letters and the ways in which their pedagogy would help bring new perspectives into things, stuff like that. It was too slow, too late. I interviewed Steven Pinker, who has a fascinating long essay in the New York Times recently about all of this, what he calls Harvard derangement syndrome. He would be the first person to say that Harvard was not moving quickly enough in order to get back to what makes it a top institution of higher education. Academic freedom there was sorely lacking. It was doing some of that, but it is true that they could have moved a lot faster. But the point is also that wouldn't have forestalled what's going on, because
Pesca.
Trump is not about, oh, you're doing what I wanted, so I'll leave you alone. I mean, Colombia capitulated and he immediately went back, for a second take.
Mike, I'm familiar enough with your work to know that you're not a big fan of anti-Semitism.
There is a centrist, moderate. Thank you so much.
There is a critique, perhaps even growing critique, that universities, and particularly elite, or so-called elite universities, are incubators of anti-Semitism, and that there is an appropriate role of the federal government to do something about it. What do you say to that critique?
Yeah, I would say if it was limited to that, that would be proper. And Columbia, which is 22% Jewish, the highest in the Ivy League, did reform. And I would say because of what Trump threatened, the reforms weren't satisfactory because Trump didn't really, or the administration didn't really want reform. And Nick's point is the biggest one, which is that Trump is using the power of the state to punish his enemies. And even if many of the enemies, some of the enemies here and there are doing things that warrant punishment, we should not support using the power of the state to punish one's enemies. And the other part is that, someone once described Donald Trump as this brilliant political figure who's excellent at diagnosing a problem or describing a problem or putting his finger on a problem and then wading in and making the problem 3 or 4 times worse. So if you want to go down the litany of Harvard's sins, yeah, they were very bad on anti-Semitism. Columbia was probably worse. And they didn't punish the Harvard law student, another graduate student who just pushed and bullied a Jewish Israeli student on the quad. By the way, that Israeli student is now not able to attend Harvard, or would not be able to attend Harvard, given the administration shutdown of foreign students. And just to kind of, now I'm inside a clause within a clause, but they're actually, the number of foreign students on these Ivy League campuses, that is something to look at. That is a problem. The Columbia School of Journalism would collapse were it not funded by Chinese nationals who want a degree from an Ivy League school. And since there are essentially no admission standards for the Columbia School of Journalism, which, by the way, would that be a bad thing if the Columbia School of Journalism would collapse? But you add it all up, and it's this unbelievably excessive overuse of state power. And I'll just leave you with 2 things. One is that how many years of multiple sclerosis cure do you think is worth this? Because for everything else Harvard does, their medical schools, their research has breakthroughs. And the idea of the government funding the top research institutes to have breakthroughs that make the companies who fund the breakthroughs richer, but also make suffering alleviated and make life better is bona fide. It goes on at Harvard. They do have some of the best and smartest researchers, and multiple sclerosis, and I could have named 10 other things, are right there on the precipice of being cured, but maybe now it'll be delayed 2, 3, 4 years, add together all the human suffering. So,
Katherine, I'll invite you to not follow up on Mike Pesca's xenophobic immigration restrictionism, and instead look a little bit about what Nick Gillespie opened up Pandora's box over there. No nonprofit status for Reason Foundation. That's great. So I'm interested in your feelings on that. But also specifically, the Congress has passed this year, the House of Representatives passed a tax on endowments at universities. Do you think that's a good idea?
Yeah. So it's actually, I think this is a perfect illustration of why a simple tax code is the best tax code. And that's because this complicated tax code immediately becomes an opportunity for the subtlest and most complicated bullying imaginable. And that's what's essentially happening with these college endowments. So first of all, college endowments were already taxed. There was just a 1.5% excise tax on investment income of private colleges that preexisted from the first Trump administration. He just did that because he hates colleges. Okay, so that already is there.
Not the Wharton School. He likes the word school.
Which he loves to point out.
Yeah. And he never mentions where did he first go was Fordham. No love for Fordham. Had to transfer into Wardham.
Fordham is probably perfectly fine with being out of this, if I had to guess. But then we have the new proposal, which creates this like complicated progressive formula that ends up taxing the richer schools at 21%. So it's functionally eliminating tax exempt status for Harvard, Yale, Princeton, those type of guys. They would be taxed the way that private corporations would be taxed. Now, there's like a longstanding joke that, Harvard and other institutions are private wealth management firms that happen to run schools, and that's not entirely wrong, or hedge funds that happen to run schools. So you could argue that that's fair, but then you start getting the carve-outs. So you've got the carve-outs for religious institutions, which are still to be litigated. So like, is Notre Dame not going to be part of this progressive taxation scheme? Maybe. And like the language is in there in theory to protect religious freedom, but in practice is going to cause all kinds of wacky incentives because you end up having to debate whether or not you are a theological institution with the IRS. And like Harvard was founded by some, ministers or something, probably. I don't know what a CANTAB is, but I'm pretty sure that's, so like they could, like you better believe some very, very, very highly paid lawyers are right now exploring whether Harvard is a religious institution all of a sudden because so much money is at stake. So you have this super complicated system. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, is the UT system, University of Texas, because they have one of the biggest endowments because they're funded by the Permian Basin oil reserves. Are they exempted or are they part of the problem?
Who knows? Yeah. Because the law is so complicated. And I think that, there is this sort of feeling of there's a big pile of money. Let's go get it. And so I think that's happening here too. But I think, what I want in terms of tax status and in terms of tax exempt is simplified first. If we can't have that, I want stable because we need institutions to be able to plan. And so when we think about stuff like Reason status, when we think about stuff like university status, like maybe it is suboptimal, but it is also a very, very, very stable equilibrium that Trump decided to mess up for the purposes of kind of making a rhetorical point about how he hates elites and I guess loves Israel. And that's not a good enough reason to do what he did.
Nick, building on that, the president of the United States over the weekend, Truth Social.
By the way, a UPenn grad.
Truth Social,
you didn't know that.
The following: I am considering taking $3 billion of grant money away from a very anti-Semitic Harvard and giving it to trade schools all across our land. End quote. You like Mike Rowe, Nick? Is that a good idea?
Mike Rowe's the best.
We're still waiting for the wedding invitation for you and Mike Rowe.
What do you think about that as an approach, as a solution, as a notion?
Part of what is becoming, visibly clear about Trump is that it's all about going to the great man or going to the king and, bending your knee and asking him for this or that special favor. This kind of stuff is bad. I think everybody on this podcast, with the exception of Mike Pesca, wants to live in by rule of law, not rule of law. Unlike Mike Pesca, we want like a stable operating system.
I'd succumb to a Gillespieocracy. I did sign up for that.
No, I don't think you would like that very much, Mike.
I would not sign up for that.
But this is, this is the point. Like we don't want this. And it's like, if you want to get rid of nonprofit status, get rid of nonprofit status for churches. And there are edge cases where the Church of Scientology had to prove that it was a church, it was a religion so that it gets tax exempt status. Back in, was it Obama now? I can't even remember when the IRS started going after nonprofits that had freedom and liberty in the names. People, brought many people, even people on the left, were outraged by that. Like, you don't want to have to litigate everything every day because of who's in the government. That's why you want as small a government as possible with as basic rules as possible, as clear and transparent, and so that we can get on with our life building these institutions. Very few people give to Harvard because it is tax exempt. In the end, their big donors are not doing it because, I get a tax break. And people at Reason ultimately are not giving to us because of a tax break. Let's, if you want to do that, that's one thing. But the way it's working now, it's just gangsterism.
Pesca, does this, the fallen world that we live in is one in which increasingly whoever holds power on the federal level is going to go and punish some enemies and reward constituencies that it wants to flatter or to reward. Given that, does that make you, centrist, more kind of sympathetic to the Katherine Mangu-Ward libertarian critique of like just too much federal government in everything because it's going to be used? If you involve the federal government in a thing, that thing will therefore be politicized and subject to political whims.
Yes. I always at least strongly consider the libertarian critique. It's, to me, something to always contend with and then, brush aside. No, actually, to actually adhere to. The trade school argument, that's a great one, right? Here's how the New York Times, for its, I guess, non-Harvard educated readers, puts this in context. Much of the money for Harvard that the administration has frozen includes research funding for scientific diseases, tuberculosis, multiple sclerosis. The unit hit hardest at Harvard is the TH School of Public Health, and they list all these diseases. And then note, and this was the helpful part, that type of research is not typically conducted at trade schools. No, it is not. No trade school has ever cured tuberculosis. And even the ones where you get to keep your own tools, like Apex Tech, does not involve the cure to tuberculosis. So exactly all the vagaries of the individual, call it gangsterism, call it sometimes during Democratic administrations, it was this fear of rebutting the sentiment at the time, like with diversity statements and this kind of compelled lockstep thinking. It's all really bad. And the correctives are often worse than the actual situation. I mean, if we started society from scratch and had better rules in place, I think we would trend to a situation where some of the smartest minds would be gathered in the same place so they can share ideas, and more great ideas would result. Now, because we have the laws that we do, and because those smart minds would be able to get more funding and get more money, there'd probably be in 100 societies, something like a Harvard, the elite institution that makes us all pissed off, but also possibly solves multiple sclerosis. What I'd like to have is a pullback from the radical anti-American and anti-Semitic sentiment on the campus, but I don't think Donald Trump's totally overboard gangsterism is the way to get there. Though I don't know what is. Maybe nothing is.
This is also the case for just disaggregating the functions of higher education. And this is Brian Kaplan and many others have argued this. Like, we should probably have different institutions that figure out multiple sclerosis and let a bunch of idiot 19-year-olds form their political opinions in real time while screaming in the middle of an attractive lawn.
Yes,
like, those
and also play lacrosse.
Are not and also play lacrosse. Like, those two functions are not intrinsically related, and separating them would solve many of these problems. I think
keg stands. I mean, you're right.
I mean, it's just the government is probably funding it too much, but there's 4,400, colleges and universities, most of which have faculty who don't read, much less publish anything or do serious research.
Most higher education is just a signaling function. I think that's
except
true.
The nice researchy stuff, which again we could be just gilding.
All right. Pesca referenced making more money, so let's shift gears and talk about that aspect of it. Last Thursday night, President Donald J. Trump hosted an exclusive VIP black tie dinner at his own resort in Virginia, at which the price of entry was having purchased the $Trump meme coin. According to the Washington Post, said Trump coin has earned well over $300 million since launching in January, which incidentally is when the second Trump administration also launched. The names of the 220 guests who between them had reportedly spent nearly $400 million on the coin remains a secret. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt explained that the president is attending it in his personal time. Katherine, I'm just a simple country lawyer. This seems kind of corrupt to me. Is is corrupt?
It seems pretty corrupt. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say this is in some ways just a quiet part loud corruption, right? Like we already have many, many mechanisms whereby people give money or ostensibly buy things in exchange for access to the powerful. This one's just a little grosser and a little more visible. In some ways, I think the reaction,
more?
a lot more. It's a lot more. I was being rhetorical. I was using
All right. No,
understatement as a form of emphasis. So yeah, I think, just the straight up give me money for a thing with my name on it so that we can sit together in a secret room and talk. A lot of money. Like the numbers also matter here. I've long said actually buying politicians is surprisingly cheap. Like it seems like that market is inefficient because you can give relatively little money and get an hour with your representative or your senator. And even with the president, people do this, for example, when they fund the inauguration. The inauguration is funded largely through private donations, and that is just the same economy that's here. But the numbers are quite small always, and perhaps the responsiveness of those in power is commensurately small. I don't know, but now the numbers are big, so I guess we'll see how that hits.
Pesca, you are a assiduously centristy, fair, journalistically kind of guy, and you do a lot of content. So constantly you are asked to kind of weigh things compared to other presidencies, compared to previous whatever. So weigh this for me. How does this, what seems to me like corruption, how does that compare to what we have seen before?
Well, you can make the case that George Washington building Washington, D.C. right near Mount Vernon certainly enriched him. He was one of the richest guys.
Check the biography on that, Mike.
Well, ceding the lands or drawing the lands around the triangle that was Washington, D.C., there were no rules for George Washington. I like George Washington a lot. I think it's unbelievably corrupt. I saw, some administration factotum on one of the Sunday shows making the case that he's not corrupt because it's all out in the open. That's audacious. Compare it to Trump. Yeah, it seems like the most corrupt thing that we've ever had to contemplate. An Eisenhower advisor it was a chinchilla. I don't know the type of fur, but took a coat and had to resign at one point. But just compare it to Trump administration 1 corruption and all the emoluments investigations, which only stopped because Trump left office and there were benefits. The emoluments clause is, about foreign grandees and princes giving you money. So it's only from foreigners. There were Congressional Budget Office reports about how much Trump made on the Trump Hotel. And if you remember that, this was a constant source. There were many scandals, a constant source of scandal boiling up. And the answer is he made up to $750,000 from people staying at the Trump Hotel. People are going to stay at the hotel anyway, foreigners. This meme coin, the market cap or the equivalent for the meme coin, it doesn't all go to Trump, is over $2 billion. So it blows his previous levels of corruption out of the water. And the whole idea of him being out in the open, that's the main point of it. Anyone can give any amount, and we don't know who they are, and we don't know how much, but he knows how much. It's just a formula for blatant bribery.
Nick, Reason and you have been longtime enthusiasts of blockchain technology and crypto as a currency and as an idea. How does this sit with that, with you? Is it has this subculture just turned kind of rancid and kind of gross, or this is just freedom happening and people are going to do lots of different things, and this is just one that is particularly attracting attention?
It's, Trump is redefining shitcoin down, Matt. The Trump coin peaked right around his inauguration at $44. It's now trading at $13. So, do with that what you will. Whereas Bitcoin, which is the actual only real true cryptocurrency, is at a record high of $109,000. Dollars per coin. So the market will sort this out. But to pick up on what Mike was saying, this, it is everything that Trump does across the board. There's a continuity with past administrations, but he has jacked it up. to a new level at this point. And I think this dinner is unseemly. And I would just, to the people who were rich enough and dumb enough to go there to have the food and to have the meeting with him, ask how Tim Apple is doing. Right? Tim Cook, the head of Apple, he paid $1 million or whatever to get to hang out with Trump in the inaugural room, and everything. And it doesn't seem to be working out so well. America has shown itself certainly over the past 25 years to be one of the worst allies when it comes to, first going into countries that don't want us there, then refusing to leave, and then doing whatever we can do to make all of the calamities worse. We're a terrible ally. Trump is a terrible ally. If you're doing business with him, it is going to cost you so much more than if you just kind of make a principled stand against him and try and disentangle from it. I think that's going to be the lesson of this big meme coin dinner.
All right. We're going to get to our listener question of the week here in a moment. But first, friends, are you still tossing and turning in the night, feeling crabby during the sleep-deprived day? Well, let me tell you about CBD from CB Distillery. Millions are turning to CBD these days for relief because it works, and not just for sleep. CB Distillery offers targeted formulations for just about everything: sleep, stress, mood, focus, pain after exercise. Nick, they even have CBD for pets. Nick, I don't know about robots though. And it's all made with the highest quality, clean ingredients, no fillers, just premium CBD. With more than 2 million satisfied customers and a 100% money-back guarantee, CB Distillery is the source to trust. So if you're struggling with sleep, stress, pronunciation, and other health concerns for which you have not yet found relief, make the change to CBD from CB Distillery. For a limited time, you can save 25% off your entire purchase. Just visit cbdistillery.com and use the promo code REASON. That is cbdistillery.com, promo code REASON. Do it today. You'll be glad you did. Specific product availability depends on individual state regulations. I've always wanted to do that. And now I've done it.
Wow, that was very good.
Right? Well, come on. I wish there was more diseases.
My terms apply. Sometimes I'm told that terms apply.
Yes, the terms. All right. Reminder to email your pithy questions and also pronunciation guide in case there is a pronunciation challenged host reading them to roundtable@reason.com. This one comes from apparent young adult fiction hero Lundy Fleming.
I thought a champion diver from the 20s.
That's also good.
Yeah.
That's true. An equestrian of some kind.
Yeah.
I've heard, says Lundy Fleming, I've heard Nick say a few times, quoting Milton Friedman, I believe, that the ultimate measure of how much effect government has on your life is how much they spend. I'm at least a little dubious. If someone magically waved a wand and got rid of all federal discretionary spending, would it actually feel like government only got a 25 to 30% haircut? Social Security, debt service, defense, and health insurance for the olds would still be there. But I would question if those are really 2/3 to 3/4 of government's influence on us. Curious as to your thoughts. You have been named Nick Gillespie. You have right of first refusal.
So the first thing is I've said that the spending is the true measure of government's cost and what has to be paid for, not the effect on life, because obviously things like regulation matter, et cetera. So, we're talking about the cost. It's got to be paid for at some point, and it can be done in a variety of ways, none of which is particularly good. But if you got rid of discretionary spending, that would include defense spending. Defense spending is part of the discretionary budget. It's half of discretionary spending. So we would have that. Veterans Health Administration services get about $131 billion. So maybe I would not feel that, but all of my friends who are somehow attached to either being veterans or veterans would. About 15% of K through 12 public spending on education each year, it comes from the federal government. So you would feel the pinch. For sure. The real problem, and I'm not exactly sure what the questioner was getting at, but it is, government spending can stop, and you are not going to feel it immediately. It's kind of like, having an arm lopped off and you go into shock, and it takes a while to figure out that you are missing
Pesca,
an arm.
Can you help us with a a surgical analogy for what the effects of cutting government would feel like?
Yes, I actually found a missing limb because everything in that...
That's mine.
Everything in... Oh, my God. Everything in that question talks about or assumes, or I'm inferring, but it's not, I think it's a reasonable inference, that you're talking about federal government spending. But government spending on the state and federal level indexes mightily for education spending. That's something like 19 or 20% of all spending. So if we didn't have education spending, then it would really, really be noticeable and affect you. And everyone would have to, I guess, pay for their own schools. And then they'd say, this is terrible. Why don't we collect our money together, and then we'd reproduce something like government spending for education. Wouldn't be the exact same way necessarily, and maybe you could have your carve-outs for charter schools, but that's the sort of thing that, you know, every society gets together and is one of their first priorities spends on education. Yeah, I also totally agree with Nick, and this is the idea of you can play around. First of all, you could cut some things and it's probably a good cut, and then you could play around and won't feel the effects, and you can make those Doge cuts, which you claim are huge but aren't. But yeah, a lot of government spending really does affect our lives, and I'm not going to tell you the Osprey is the best thing to spend on, or all of those aircraft carriers, and maybe if you cut a couple in half, China will keep to its own sphere of influence, but very much maybe they won't. And then the other part of it, and this is getting much worse, is spending on servicing the debt, which gives us nothing, except not doing it would give us something, which is default and calamity. So it's the thing that you'd notice it in the absence.
Katherine, how do you answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question asker is making a good point, which is, you know, the way that we feel government is our tax rates and our regulatory burden. In many, many, many cases, and that the sheer dollar amount of government, whether it's federal or state and local as well, is potentially secondary to that. And I think on a basic level, that insight is true, and it explains a lot of our politics, including why politicians of recent years have been so willing to cut taxes and not worry in the end about the total spending number or the total debt number, because they know that that's what people feel. That's what people kind of emotionally interact with respect to the government on the funding side. And then you know, the absolute rage of being able to like repair your porch is or like rebuild your burnt down house or send your kid to a school that teaches them to read. Like, that is the stuff where people kind of come in direct contact with the state, and that if we could change those things, people would feel maybe their sort of day-to-day utility would be less, speaking of Bentham, but their sense of how much of their problems were to blame on the state, I think would change radically and out of proportion to that spending.
All right. Speaking of government spending, last week, the United States Mint, which is a money manufacturing thing and not a delicious treat, announced that it has made its last order of pennies after 233 years of valuable service to this nation. Because of inflation and copper prices, pennies these days cost 4 cents a piece to make. And I think even Katherine can do that math. I don't know why I was just assuming Catherine's bad at math, because she's not. Just
sexism.
Gendered. She's a lady. Stopping production, which frankly should have been done a long time ago, frankly, is estimated to save around $56 million a year, which raises the question, at least to me, of what are some other absolutely stone obvious things we should have done years ago to save at least some money, because the government shouldn't be doing it. Pesca, let's start with you.
First of all, I have advocated for the eliminating of pennies for years and years. The two biggest things that I advocate for, annoying my listeners, are very pro-plastic straws and for the elimination of pennies. Whenever I got any politician in, I would ask him or her about eliminating pennies. They all demurred, and this is instructive. Pete Buttigieg said, "Oh, that's interesting. I'll have to think about it."
Soft
Michael Bennett said, "Interesting idea." They all the Democratic politicians I ever raised it to said, I don't want to commit to to commit to a policy on this stupid penny thing. And then Trump comes in and he quite sensibly eliminates the penny. So there's something to be said for the Trump method. Is the Institute of Peace back? I think it's back. And that's the one I think we should eliminate. It was eliminated for like a week and a half, and no one has advocated for the resurgence of the Institute of Peace except the people who sued over that. So I like the State Department in theory. I haven't seen anyone advocate suitably for the Institute of Peace in my mind.
Katherine, what is a penny murder like immediate savings or thing that we should do?
First of all, looking forward to reading your new series of mystery novels, The Penny Murders,
Yes.
which will be
great.
very good. Cozy murder, cozy mystery is a whole
Starring
genre.
Lundy Fleming.
Yes.
Lundy Fleming.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Penny
You should
Murders
pair
Book
up.
3,
The intrepid
The Zinc Chronicles.
amateur detective.
Either pair up with Lundy as a co-author or name your detective after Lundy.
Yes.
Perfect. I would eliminate Saturday delivery for the U.S. Postal Service. That's insane. It's crazy. Why are they operating 6 days a week? They can keep delivering packages. That actually is like a thing where
You can't.
You want to hear
If
my
they're
explanation?
out in the truck, why not carry the mail if they're carrying packages?
Package delivery, which they do mostly on contract with Amazon and others, is operates independently. It has different trucks. It has a different bottom line. There's a whole separate operation that they have actually done vaguely commercial things to make sense. Mail delivery, meanwhile, is just nonsense. We do not need our junk mail on Saturdays also. We can wait until Monday for the penny saver, which I guess is now the nickel saver, in our mailboxes. We do not need it. So that would be about $2 billion a year, according to the USPS's own estimates. And that's a lot of money for a service that no one really needs.
Nick, wave your magic wand. What do you kill?
I would shut down anything in the Capitol that congressmen and senators get for free. So whatever their lunch programs are and the stupid barber shop and all the Marine bands like the All Harmonica Ensemble and whatnot, which used to get trotted out. Remember during the days under Obama. I guess I'm thinking fondly of the Obama years when we were stopping government spending on various things, and people would be like, this means military bands are not going to be able to serenade the lighting of the White House Christmas tree.
Who will think of the sousaphones, Nick?
Let's get rid of all of those. Sousaphones are alive and well in every marching band across the country. And that's where they deserve to be, like rock bands in garages, so get rid of all of that. The one note of caution I would put in this is that this is the beginning of the elimination, conceivably, of currency, which is disturbing because we have been fed a long biased diet of saying that the only use case for cash in the modern world is criminal activity or things you don't want traced. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe that is, and maybe criminal activity is not a bad thing. But I worry about that because we're going to be switching by government fiat eventually to some kind of cashless society. And that's not a society I want to live in.
Are a lot of hitmen and heroin dealers taking pennies?
I don't know. Well, this here,
not very
here is
good ones, I think.
A mystery for Matt Welch would be that there's a pile of pennies found, and it turns out that the hitman uses a sock full of pennies that he buys super cheap once they are no longer used as currency, hits somebody over the head, and then just leaves the coin scattered around.
It's like the leg of lamb.
It's a blackjack.
It's exactly like that, or the icicle, the puddle under the radiator,
knife.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my solution, my proposal to save $33.5 million with an M a year is to, eliminate the Selective Services Administration.
The pre-registration?
Pre-registration, you turn 18, and that money saves you, among other things, paying for these god-awful social media ads of them like, hey, parents, invest in your kid's future by going to ssa.gov. It's like, no, that's not investing in their future. That's complying with a government order under threat of not being able to hold a commercial license in 40 out of the 50 states and possibly jail time, but they don't really ever execute that. Screw that. Your life, your body does not belong to any government at all. And if there was a war, you figure it out.
Did we talk on this podcast about how at dinner last week, my daughter was like dunking on my son for having to sign up for the Selective Service?
Oh, that's right.
She was like, it sucks to be you. Like, it was really something.
That was not that far away from being expanded to include your daughter.
That's what I said.
A few years ago.
I was like, don't get ahead of yourself, friend.
In the name of equity.
Is 18 the age for that?
Yeah, is 18 the age of that?
I think I missed that for my son who just turned 18. I know I didn't do it for him.
He
got 30 days, bro.
Don't coddle him, okay?
Yeah.
Free-range parenting means doing 6 months to a year in a federal penitentiary.
Right.
Failing to.
I think true free-range parenting means raising a kid who refuses to register for the Selective Service. So,
what's the
he's going
odds
to be? He's going to be a guy on the run in the main character of the next Lundy Fleming novel.
So true.
Oh my
so
God,
true.
Yeah. Canada or Bust, a Lundy Fleming mystery.
He has a secret, but is it the murder or something else?
Pesca, as someone who's sending your 18-year-old obviously to Harvard for its anti-Semitism, just know that if he doesn't sign up, you cannot get financial aid. Not that you need it, of course.
Don't worry. I'm sending him to a very expensive but very Jewish school. Yes.
What school is that, or is that putting a bullet on him?
Have you heard of Tulane?
Tulane.
It is. I didn't know this until he got in. 44% Jewish.
44%
Yeah. Oh my God.
Jewish. Wow.
Right? Yeah.
Boy, these
being
people
like
really are not getting in the Ivies anymore.
Have you become the guy who just likes to count Jews in things?
These people.
I'm the Jews and things, guys. So I got a half of one here. We're 1/8 Jew.
Yeah.
Unless I'm missing some of your Hebraic heritage.
Is Tulane a Catholic college, or is it just a good time party school?
Clearly not. I mean, I don't know. I hope it has Creole roots. I hope, like the Pope, they find that it was originally Haitian. You know about this, right?
What are they? The Green Wave or something? They
are the Green Wave. Do you want?
What a wonderful.
Let's
mascot.
go back and name the nickname of every school mentioned in this podcast: the Crimson, the Rams, the Quakers. Yeah. Did I miss any colleges? Have any?
We may have mentioned Yale in passing.
I mentioned
Catherine, do you know what Yale's nickname is? They have two, actually.
The Rowers.
Why don't you tell me, Nick?
That wouldn't be fair because I didn't go there. But sometimes they're called the Elis.
Yes.
But also the Bulldogs.
We are the Bulldogs. Yes, and Princeton, of course, we have Tigers.
The Tigers
over there.
Yes.
So.
And then, like the nickname of the nickname, like Old Nassau.
Please tell us your semi-alma mater, UCSB, has a great name.
Obviously, the Gauchos. Who are we even playing around with? Rutgers is just the criminals, right? Or
they're sometimes called the Nappy-Headed Hose by Don Imus.
Oh my God, it was Rutgers.
The Scarlet Nappy-Headed
But the Scarlet Knights, which,
that's
like
great name.
many of these mascot names, was actually adopted in the 50s, I think.
Because
at
of
some
racism?
point, they were like the Chanticleers, which is a type of rooster, which was very popular when it was a men's school.
I believe that's there's a South Carolina school that's the Chanticleers. Maybe
there's the Gamecocks.
Yes, that's USC. But I'm thinking
and for a while, I think I'm remembering
Charleston College. Let's go with.
Oh. But the USC, University of South Carolina, for a while, I believe they called their ladies teams, which are now the Game Hens. They were the Lady Gamecocks.
Yes.
Which is so fucking awesome. Right?
University of Rhode Island Lady Rams. I mean, what are you doing, guys? Just be the U's. Be the U's.
Yeah.
No, don't be the. That's a very bad team name. I think we can agree.
I have an update. The Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. I misidentified.
It's not a bad name, and that might have been the name when mighty Paul Robeson was part of, he was an All-American in at least football, maybe another sport at Rutgers. And they were so kind to him that they built a dorm just for him to live in. You know, it didn't have anything to do with the fact that he was one of like 3 black students at Rutgers, but they built a dorm just for him.
the communist dorm. Speaking of great singers.
Yeah, well, it was just a Potemkin, Matt. It's a flat. You just walked through it and there was nothing in there.
Let's go to our end of podcast, what we have been consuming in the cultural arena besides pesky and sports mascot names. Katherine, why don't you start us off?
I read the J.G. Ballard novel High Rise from 1975, and I don't recommend reading this novel late at night if you're already in a bad mood, because it is dark. Holy moly. It's Lord of the Flies, but what if it was bougie grown-ups who lived in a fancy apartment building? That's it. That's a whole concept, and it is executed with the kind of dark consistency and commitment that like Black Mirror wishes it had. It is fantastic. It is fantastically written, and just like really asks you to like, as bad as you think humanity is now, it's so much worse. It's so much worse. There's like a lot of descriptions of how the apartment building, once all of its infrastructure breaks down, smells. Like there's a lot of smell descriptions in this book, just really, really dark. Is it an indictment of capitalism? Not super a lot. There's a little bit in there. More kind of a Freudian analysis, an indictment of human nature. But in case you do read it as an indictment of capitalism, I do want to provide a second countervailing recommendation. I'm sorry, Matt. I will be brief. And that is that I tried the frozen pickle lemonade from Popeyes this weekend.
Ooh.
Frozen pickle lemonade. Incredible.
What?
This is America at its finest.
Okay.
It was a freezing slushy of high fructose corn syrup into which they just pumped 2 shots of pickle juice. It's a little salty. It's got a weird aftertaste. It freezes your brain if you drink it too quickly. And this is the kind of thing that people rightly revere our nation for inventing. Go get yourself one. If you do, like me, you can get it at the mall where I was this weekend with my teenage daughter.
Also a big fan of Popeye's Cajun Sparkle. I believe I have written voluminously about this at
I think
Reason,
if you
but
search Cajun Sparkle on our website, you will
to
find more
ask
than
for
one
it
hit.
now. It is the crack cocaine of condiments. It is
It's
delicious.
got like MSG in it, right? Isn't that why it's good?
I think it is like MSG, and then they stuff a little more MSG in to the MSG. It's
You know what I'm going to
MSG is
do?
great for mouthfeel. It really is.
Frozen pickle lemonade. We're going to put some booze in it. It's too bad Peter's not here to help. And then we're going to rim the glass with the Cajun Sparkle.
Oh my God.
This is going to be the drink of the summer.
And Mike, that's what your kid's going to be drinking at Tulane when they wake up every morning, because it's Louisiana Fast.
If that's all he means by the Cajun Sparkle, I'll feel like I'm getting off easy.
Yeah, don't snort it. Well, I'll tell you that much. Just eat it.
Little
Don't snort it.
Lessons
Sparkle.
learned the hard
I'm in
way.
the crew of Cajun Sparkle. Oh God! I told him
Nick.
about the freshman 15, and he committed to it.
Yeah.
15
signed
grams of Cajun Sparkle.
Nick, as a Cajun Sparkle jockey, what did you consume?
What I consumed to follow up on my Yoko Ono supremacy of last week or a couple of weeks ago, book whose official publication date is today. It's Jay Hoberman, the longtime Village Voice critic, who I think teaches at Columbia in film studies, but it's a book called Everything Is Now: Primal Happenings, Radical Music, Underground Movies, and the 1960s Avant-Garde. It is kind of a study of the long decade of the 60s, from the late 50s into the early 70s, of all of the weird stuff and great stuff that was happening in New York, in the visual arts, in painting, in video, in music, in happenings. It is a spectacular book. Yoko Ono is a big presence in the beginning of it. She was affiliated and helped create the group Fluxus, which had happenings in parts of Manhattan, Matt. When you read it about, this is before Soho was known as Soho, and it was basically a lot of abandoned light industrial places where artists would set up shop and just do weird stuff. Sleep No More is like the Broadway version of a happening. that you might have pondered or stumbled across in New York in the 60s. If you liked things like Yoko Ono's performance art, Andy Warhol, Jonas Mekas, the great underground filmmaker, alternative filmmaker in the Velvet Underground, this is a book that will show how so many different things were happening, and then they get tied together in these weird knots. And for me, the most interesting thing about Hoberman's book is that he spends a lot of time on a mostly forgotten artist named Boris Lurie, who started a movement called No with an exclamation point. And it's essentially, if you took the pop art sensibilities of a Roy Lichtenstein or Andy Warhol and made it super negative and saying no to consumer culture and no to the end of history after World War II. Lurie had the horrible fate of being in both a Nazi concentration camp and a Soviet gulag, came over with his father, became a penny stock millionaire, and then started doing incredible art that uses the grammar of pop art, but to be unbelievably dark. He is the turd in the punch bowl of post-war kind of optimism and growth. So everything is now Primal Happenings, Radical Music, Underground Movies, and the 1960s Avant-Garde by J. Hoberman. It makes me think the same thing is happening in New York right now or someplace else in America that we will read about in 20 years and realize that we were part of this without even understanding that it was going on all around us.
Awesome. Mike Pesca, what have you consumed of interest of late?
Well, I read about 5 books a week for the show, so I just grabbed some off my desk. I had Phil Graham on talking about this one. Ooh. He's irascible. Senator Phil Graham.
He's got a good radio face, too, right?
He does.
Is he still talking about that? Like how physically ugly he is?
Yes, he was chased out of the Republican primary because he had small teeth. Then I read this one because I'm doing a piece about the podcast Empire City, which is very inaccurate in times. But this is called The Kidnapping Club. And this went on in the 1840s. New York police officers just grabbing up black people off the street and selling them back to slavery. I'm doing an upcoming event with Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, Original Sin. I don't know. Everyone has an opinion on that. And mine is, I'm glad it was written. This is Leah Littman, Strict Scrutiny co-host. And I haven't aired the interview yet, and I don't want to prejudice it. But Leah Littman has done, I think, 100 promotional interviews for the book, and this will be the one with the most pushback, including me playing tape of
What is it about? At the risk of...
Strict Scrutiny is a Pod Save America legal podcast where they're very smart, the 3 hosts, but they start with a basis of, isn't the Supreme Court on a track to lawlessness, as she says, or authoritarianism? And they're always laughing at each other's jokes and never questioning each other's assumptions. The subtitle is How the Supreme Court Runs on Conservative Grievance, Fringe Theories, and Bad Vibes. And I just know Matt Welch is allergic to what she does, which is in each chapter, she takes some jurisprudence and relates it to pop culture. So one chapter is all about the Barbie movie, and one chapter is all about there's money in the banana stand. I think that's the Citizens United chapter. It tries hard. But we're going to end on a triumph. Just my favorite, Helen Lewis, the genius myth. Reason should get her on, do whatever about it.
It's already happening, good. Mike. Like usual, you're behind the times. But it's a fantastic book.
She's a fantastic writer. Her Substack, Blue Stocking, comes out once a month and has every once a week and has 3 recommendations. It has 5, but 3 of them I wouldn't have heard of, and they're always worth it. And as someone who's doing a Substack compendium of news, I value it. She's the best.
Thank you for those 5 recommendations, Mike Pesca.
Too much?
I'm no longer sorry about sneaking in the pickle lemonade.
Holy cow. So mine is, I did a thing that a lot of other Americans did, being the stand-in normie on this podcast. I watched Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning.
Oh, wow.
On opening day, no less, at an IMAX. So there.
Did you do your own stunts?
I did not. What I did was I was exhausted and bent over double breathing, just watching Tom Cruise run. Like, enough. You're older than me, dude. Like I know that I would be, I wouldn't have come out looking as good after grabbing onto the World War I era airplane and jumping from one to another and stuff. Crazy stunts, incomprehensible movie, very fun. The apparent takeaway is that AI is going to control the universe and manipulate all sense of what is reality, especially with audiovisual imagery, and convince us to not trust one another, which is going to lead to thermonuclear war unless Tom Cruise saves us. And part of the saving is really fun because they're continuously worried about, you can't put all that power in one person's hand. It has sort of a ring of power thing of it, except for Tom Cruise's hand. And I think that's a metaphor for all of us. If there's going to be someone who we can trust with world safety, vis-a-vis all the things that can go wrong, I guess it just has to be Tom Cruise. But only if Scientology is allowed to be a nonprofit.
Well, he knows his way around the back of a bar, Matt, if you've seen Cocktail. So
that is true.
I think he can pretty much do whatever. When you see him toss those tumblers in the air and catch them behind his back and then pour a perfect old-fashioned.
And then shoot some pool. Come on.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, that's true. And
does
even
he
in a
have to-
wheelchair, he dominates the conversation,
Yeah,
right?
he played saxophone in all the right moves. He's a man of multi-talent.
It's a wrestler, right?
That was when he left that small Pennsylvania town, Mike Pesca. That's when deindustrialization caught on.
That was it.
Yeah.
Catherine, you tried to
That
talk.
was the
What were you gonna
hollowing
say?
out, was Tom Maypother leaving Pennsylvania, yeah.
I was just wondering if the reason he had to use the World War I era planes is because the computers in all the others mean that he can't. Is that why?
Correct.
I love that plot element. I love the computers are compromised. Our only solution is to drive this stick shift airplane or whatever. Perfect. Love it.
That was apparently.
Is it like a Red Baron kind of
Yes.
airplane, Matt?
Yeah.
So does he loop the loop and all that?
With
We're going to have to break into the Air and Space Museum and get the Wright brothers plane because it's the only one that we can trust.
against arch supervillain, not Lundy Fleming, but Esai Morales, who
Wow,
I'd
really?
forgotten about for 40 years.
Wasn't he in Band of the Hand and I think TV's Fame?
I don't know about TV's Fame. I maybe ethnically typecast him of being in the Lou Diamond Phillips.
Was he the brother?
Oh,
I think he was the
older
brother.
brother, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
younger brother or whatever.
Why did
Richie
this
He was the
podcast
one who's
get
like, get in
more...
the old plane. Don't use new technology. Get in that plane, Richie Valens.
When
This
Tom
podcast got
Cruise
more
gets quicker.
Suderman-y on the day that Suderman was gone. Why is this happening?
We
when
miss
Tom Cruise
him.
gets sick, do they have to use leeches? Is it all based on...
Is
Not-
John Voight still in the
Yes.
Mission Impossible franchise? Or did
He
get
was.
cashier?
There's a big montage at the beginning. I don't. Spoiler alert.
yeah.
There's montages.
Oh, wow.
but,
so it's like Rocky V. It's mostly montage.
He comes through that. All right, let's wrap this up. Thank you everyone for listening. I'm sure different hosting will come down the pike next week. Nick Gillespie, are there any events that you would like to publicize here on this podcast?
Yes, on June 3rd in New York City, we're doing a Reason Speakeasy with Susanna Cahalan, author of the book The Acid Queen, which is a biography of Rosemary Woodruff Leary, one of Timothy Leary's wife, who went on the lam with him. And the book is fantastic, and it is a great way of revisiting both the 60s counterculture, but especially the crackdown from the government on that counterculture. So that is in New York. On June 3rd. You can go to reason.com/events. I'll also throw out to people on the West Coast in Seattle, the Emerald City, I believe, Seattle, that Mike Pesca and I will be participating in the Cascade Festival of Ideas on this coming Saturday. So if you're in Seattle or Tacoma, Olympia is probably close enough. I don't know. Spokane might be too much of a haul, but come out to the Cascade PBS Festival of Ideas.
Pesca, what is the best venue for people to seek out your work?
You go to the Substack, the Mike Pesca Substack, and every day I put together the gist list, a compendium of news that if you miss out on any of them, you'll be mocked and you'll just be an idiot. And I'd hate for you to be an idiot. So that's what I'm doing every day with the gist list. And then you could listen to the podcast, The Gist. But I don't want to overload you with things. Just the Ideas Festival and the gist list.
How do you spell gist?
GIST. Thank you. Thank you for asking.
thank you, Mike Pesca, for subbing in and doing spectacular work.
Well, thank you, Matt Welch, for subbing in. How about that?
There you go. If you like what we do here at the Reason Foundation, which publishes this and other beautiful things, please consider a tax-deductible, before Nick Gillespie gets in charge of everything, donation at reason.com/donate. We got jobs for hiring, reason.com/jobs. There's events. Do the same thing with events. And go check it all out. And we'll see you next week. Goodbye.
What you're selling.